Okay, so we have some questions for Secretary General. Well, Moni's Secretary General, please stand up, please. We have someone with the microphones, please.
Mr. Rasmussen, thank you very much for your speech. It was quite informative and important, and it listened to my question nicely, actually. In regards to your viewpoints regarding America's recent turn to Asia, and the fact that global geopolitics is moving to Asia for the 21st century, and this is without a doubt the trend in global politics. My question is specifically being, with America going west, military-wise, geopolitically, economically, maybe even socially, where do you see NATO in the next 25 years? Will our relationship with the US hold up?
If I understand you correctly, it's about the American so-called pivot to the Asia-Pacific region and my view on that, how it will affect the transatlantic relationship. First point, I welcome the American pivot to the Asia-Pacific region. I find it quite natural that the United States will put more emphasis on that part of the world, taking into account the rise of emerging powers like China and India. I do not consider it a hostile act towards those countries, but on the contrary, stronger US engagement in that part of the world can also contribute to the concept of cooperative security with those countries. Second point, the US pivot to the Asia-Pacific region will not take place at the expense of the transatlantic cooperation. One concrete example is missile defense, as I was already mentioned. The US has decided to actually invest more in European security through the missile defense system. The missile defense system will profit from a significant input from the US, and European allies will also contribute, and by linking these systems together, we can protect the populations in European NATO member states. It's a significant indication of continued US engagement in European security. And there are also other examples, but let me make it brief and just conclude. Yes, I welcome stronger US emphasis on the Asia-Pacific region, and at the same time, I note that the Americans themselves have stressed that it will not take place at the expense of the transatlantic partnership that remains the bedrock of security in Europe and North America.
We have some delegates from the other room.
I'm Casey Webb, an American representing the Netherlands. With so many European countries cutting down on their defense budget, is smart defense the only solution, or could NATO cut down some of their responsibilities in the world?
Of course, smart defense is not the only solution. Smart defense is about more efficient use of the resources we have. But obviously, in the longer-term perspective, we also need resources. Smart defense is not a smart way to cut, but it's a smart way to get more out of what we have. However, it is important to stress that there is a lower limit as to how little our member states can invest in defense and still live up to the requirements of being a member of this alliance. While I realize that it's not realistic to expect much more money for defense in the very near future, I hope that once the economy recovers, and one day it will, definitely, once the economy recovers, then there will also be a political will to invest more in defense, to invest what is necessary, to modernize and transform our military into a more flexible military that is able to cope with the security challenges of the 21st century. But I would like to mention one example that it can actually, or it is possible to increase defense spending even in a time of economic austerity. Estonia has reached our benchmark of spending 2% of GDP on defense, despite the fact that Estonia some years ago was severely hit by the economic crisis. So to a certain degree, it's also a question about political will, and not only economic capacity, but also political will to prioritize. So in conclusion, smart defense is an efficient instrument to get more security for money, but in a longer term perspective, we also need to devote more resources to security.
Okay, we have now Mr. Kubiec, please. Thank you.
My name is Kubinet Francis Vladimir. I am Romanian representing delegation of Poland. Your Excellency, in the field of counter-piracy strategies of the Horn of Africa, aside from the broader projects of improving national governance and the rule of law in the countries of the area, what specific measure could NATO implement to translate the political will into local actions?
On counter-piracy?
Yes.
As you know, we do have a counter-piracy operation ongoing along the coast of Somalia. Having said that, it's also a fact that we could wish to have more resources for that counter-piracy operation. At the moment, we have only 2 ships operating. That's what I would call the lower limit, if we are to call it an operation. So it is, as you indicated, a challenge to actually get NATO member states to provide assets for our counter-piracy operation. We have on a regular basis what we call force generation conferences, where we try to generate assets for our military operations, including our counter-piracy operation. And of course, we as an alliance do what we can to encourage our member states to provide assets also for our counter-piracy operation. The fact is, and maybe when you ask for suggestions as to how we can generate more resources, it's also a good idea to actually tell the positive story about about our achievements. And the fact is that thanks to not only NATO's but also other organizations and nations' counter-piracy efforts, we have succeeded in bringing down the number of successful piracy attacks. So it helps to conduct counter-piracy operations. So I hope that we will see nations provide more assets in the future.
We have another question from someone from the Brozzi room.
Thank you, Secretary General. My name is Terrence Check. I am representing Romania on the Operations Planning Committee. I am from the United States. My question is pertaining to Afghanistan and ISAF. Can you please clarify NATO's position on negotiations with the Taliban? Are they a necessary prerequisite to security and transition, or does it give political legitimacy to an entity that may impede the process of forming a stable and well-functioning Afghan civil society? Thank you.
Well, NATO as such is not involved in any negotiation with the Taliban. That's my first point. Secondly, we appreciate all efforts to find a political solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. provided that certain conditions are fulfilled. And I would highlight 3 conditions. Firstly, any such process must be led by the Afghans themselves. We can't, as an international community, impose anything on the Afghans. It must be led by the Afghan government. So that's the first condition. Secondly, the Taliban and others involved in such a process must abide by and respect the Afghan constitution, including respect for human rights, and of course that also includes respect for women's rights. That's the second point. And thirdly, the Taliban and others involved in such a process must cut links with terrorist groups and denounce violence. If these 3 conditions are fulfilled, I think we should give it a try. Whether the Taliban leadership is sincerely engaged in finding a political solution is more doubtful. I don't know. But what I do know is that the best way to facilitate a political process is to keep up a strong military pressure so that the Taliban realizes that they have no chance whatsoever militarily. So a political process is not an alternative to continuing the military campaign. A determined military campaign will, in my opinion, facilitate a political process.
We have one question from one delegate about Afghanistan over there.
I'm Peter, I'm from Greece, and I represent France in the simulation. I would like to ask you, with great uncertainty whether Afghanistan can be left alone after 2014, with the threat of Taliban still existent, but above all with 3,073 soldiers of the coalition forces dead, according to your opinion, Your Excellency, is the operation in Afghanistan so far a success or a failure? Thank you.
A success. What is the criterion of success if we look ahead to 2014? My criterion of success is to see the Afghan security forces take full responsibility for the security by the end of 2014, according to the timetable we have laid out. As you know, we started the so-called transition process last year, a gradual handover of lead responsibility to the Afghan security forces, province by province, and that process will be completed by the end of 2014. We are right now in the midst of what we call Tranche 3 of transition, and when that Tranche 3 has been fully implemented, 75% of the Afghan population will live in areas where the Afghan security forces have taken lead responsibility. And that process will, as I said, continue until the end of 2014. So far, this process has been a great success. We have seen the Afghan security forces take lead responsibility quite successfully. We have seen the Afghan security forces deal with security incidents in a very professional manner. A couple of months ago, I visited Kabul. I had an opportunity to observe Afghan special operation forces in action. I was very impressed by what I saw. So based on that, I'm confident that they will be able to take full responsibility by the end of 2014. And that would, in my opinion, be success. So we are on the right track. Our ISAF mission will end by the end of 2014, and we will continue from 2015 with a NATO-led training mission. The Afghans will do the combat. We will support them with training, assistance, give advice, and I would also expect that part of our operation to be a success. But I have to add that this is also about more than just security. It's also about improving the Afghan government's ability to provide good governance. And this is the reason why the Tokyo conference that took place last weekend is so important, because it was about a strong international commitment to providing necessary resources for the Afghan government to build up its capacity to fight corruption, to fight drug trades, to provide better governance, including provide basic services to the Afghan people. Because if we are to ensure long-term peace and stability in Afghanistan, we also have to improve people's confidence in their own government. And to that end, we need a more determined fight against corruption, and we need an improved capability to provide basic services to the Afghan people. So I think we are on the right track, and this is the reason why I, without any hesitation, will characterize our operation as a success.
Thank you. Please.
Theoretically, if two NATO member states were to go to war against one another at some point in the coming few decades, which two would you guess they would be, and why? Thanks.
Could you tell us your name, maybe, and your delegation? Thank you.
I'm Joseph from Canada.
You're not thinking about Canada and US. No. Well, I'm very pleased that you started by saying theoretically, because it is a theoretic, and I would say a hypothetical situation. Not least because being a member of our alliance also helps to settle such disputes in a peaceful manner. And let's speak very openly about it. I think you are very well acquainted with geopolitics and recent political and military history. And you all know very well that we have in the past seen some disputes between Turkey and Greece in the Aegean Sea. But I would argue that thanks, not least thanks to NATO, and thanks to their membership of our alliance, we have managed to solve such disputes, and they have managed to solve such disputes in a peaceful manner. And it just adds to my argument that NATO is the most successful peace movement the world has ever seen. Not just because of this dispute, but the fact is that for more than 60 years, NATO has been the guarantor of peace and stability in Europe and North America. And as far as Europe is concerned, this is the longest period of peace in the history of Europe. So I don't hesitate to call NATO a successful peace movement. So what you mentioned is pure theory, thanks to NATO.
Okay, some gender balance. Miss Anita Kirichenko, please. Thank you.
My name is Anita Kirichenko, and I'm from Lithuania. During Moni's simulation, I'm representing Germany. Your Excellency, my question is, the grand vision of NATO is a world without nuclear weapons. In your opinion, which measures are the best in order to implement a balanced strategy aimed at reducing nuclear stockpiles? Thank you.
You're right that in our strategic concept, as well as in the Defense and Deterrence Posture Review that we adopted at the Chicago Summit, we have stated that we will work to create the conditions for a world without nuclear weapons. Let me remind you that this is actually not breaking news, because already in 1970, almost all countries in the world subscribed to that vision in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In that treaty, it is clearly stated that the goal is to achieve a world without nuclear weapons. And NATO has subscribed to that because our member states have subscribed to that vision. Now, having said that, we also add in our strategic concept as well as in the Defense and Deterrence Posture Review that as long as nuclear weapons exist, NATO will remain a nuclear alliance. So, in the foreseeable future, NATO will remain a nuclear alliance. Now, you asked me what would be the most efficient instrument to actually achieve the grand vision of a world without nuclear weapons. You might argue that it may not be realistic to actually have a world without nuclear weapons, because there will always be someone who would like that weapon at their disposal. But anyway, we have subscribed to the vision to create such conditions. And I think the best way is to pursue a pragmatic, step-by-step approach. And one of the first steps to be taken could be to reduce the number of so-called tactical nuclear weapons. And we have indicated in our Defense and Deterrence Posture Review that we would be in favor of a reduced reliance on such nuclear weapons, provided that further reductions take place in a transparent and balanced manner. And with that, we also hint at the fact that while NATO countries have reduced their arsenals of tactical nuclear weapons substantially since the end of the Cold War, the same is not the case when it comes to Russia. So there is a clear disparity, and we have to take that into account. We would very much like to work in the direction of reduced stockpiles of such nuclear weapons, but it is a prerequisite that the Russians commit themselves to the same. So I think the best way forward is to pursue such a pragmatic approach, step by step, reduce the reliance of such nuclear weapons. But of course, we are not naive. We want to protect our populations effectively. So if we are to reduce further on top of what we have already done, then we need to know that others will do the same.
Thank you. We have a question from our project manager, Mr. George Manea. Thank you.
My name is George Mihail Manea. I come from Romania, and I'm the project manager of NATO Youth Summit. My question will be also regarding our project, for which we start working in February 2011, so approximately 1 year and a half. And my question addressed to Your Excellency is regarding the impact of NATO Youth Summit on NATO mechanisms and decision-making process for the young generation will be. Thank you.
First of all, I'm really grateful for all the efforts, all the work invested in this project, because I consider it of utmost importance to engage the young generation actively in security policy and the work of NATO. Not only because it's about your future, it's about your security, but also because my generation grew up in the shadow of the Iron Curtain and the Warsaw Pact. Actually, I couldn't imagine things to change. And then suddenly the whole thing changed. But as one of those who grew up during the Cold War, I know very well why we need NATO. But for the young generation, it may not be as understandable, or at least people don't take it just for granted. We have to make the case in quite a different way. I saw with my own eyes why NATO was necessary. But for the young generation, things look differently. And in a way, that's positive, because we now live in a post-Cold War era, and that's good. But we should also realize that we need to refine arguments and approach to make sure that the young generation understands why it is so important for our collective security that we have an alliance as NATO. So in that respect, the project is of utmost importance. The youth summit in Chicago was very valuable. I got reports from the discussions and the outcome of the summit. It's been very interesting for me to read about it. And likewise, I look forward to seeing the results of your work during this simulation project. So there is a direct channel from your work, from your project to my office. And I'm sure that I will benefit from that. Because I want to set an agenda that looks into the future, and it is stating the obvious that you are the future, but I think you can identify future priorities in quite another way than my generation is able to do. So we need that input, and I think that will be the direct impact of your work. So I'm really grateful for all your work.
Thank you for your kind words, Secretary General. We have another question for you, Ms. Angelova. We have time for just a few questions.
Mr. Secretary General, I'm Desisłava Angiova. I am from Bulgaria and I represent Greece. So my question is, in times of economic austerity, what is your opinion on the construction of the missile defense shield in Europe, and in particular its impact on the relations with Russia? Thank you.
I suppose that when you relate our missile defense project to the economic austerity, you might indicate that can we afford to invest in such a project during a time of economic austerity? My first point is that it is important to understand that even if we live in a period of economic austerity, the threats against our security will not disappear. The threats still exist. And it is a fact that more than 30 countries in the world have missile technologies or are aspiring to get missile technologies, some with a range sufficient to hit targets in Europe, including in the southeastern part of Europe. And we consider it essential, and an essential part of our obligation to protect our populations, that we also adapt to these new threats and do what we can to protect our populations effectively against the missile threat. Actually, I think the defense of freedom and the values we believe in is priceless. So even in a period of economic austerity, we have an obligation to stand ready, to be prepared for defense of our populations and the values we believe in. And that includes missile defense. Now, in more concrete terms, it's actually manageable to create this missile defense system because the Americans provide a significant input. The American missile defense system will constitute a major input to the NATO missile defense system. And then at this stage, 10 European allies contribute some assets as well. And by linking these existing assets together, we can protect our populations at a relatively small additional cost. So it is economically a good deal. So even if we accept the premise of economic austerity, I would argue that it is affordable and it is necessary to develop a missile defense system.
Thank you. We have 1 minute for this question. Thank you.
Your Excellency, my name is Zoran Sokic. I'm coming from Serbia, representing United Kingdom here. I would kindly ask your opinion on current developments regarding the situation in Kosovo and how Serbian stronger Euro-Atlantic integration would influence the resolution of that situation. Thank you.
On Kosovo, first the overall perspective. A positive assessment. We have seen significant improvements of the situation and the security in Kosovo during the recent 10 to 13 years. So that's the overall situation. We started out by having a KFOR presence of around 50,000 troops. Now we have 1/10, around 5,000. So seen from that overall perspective, it's really been significant progress. It's a clear testament to NATO's and KFOR's success that we have been able to improve security and reduce our troop presence. Second point, unfortunately, during the last year, we have seen very unfortunate security incidents in the northern part of Kosovo. And it remains a matter of concern. We have decided to maintain the current troop level that's around 5,000 to 6,000 troops to ensure that we can fully implement the United Nations mandate in Resolution 1244 to maintain a safe and secure environment and the freedom of movement, including in the northern part of Kosovo. So it remains a matter of concern. Now, looking forward, I think it's of utmost importance to stress that a division or partitioning of Kosovo is completely out of the question. The northern part of Kosovo will remain an integrated part of Kosovo. And I have a strong appeal to both Pristina and Belgrade. To Belgrade, that the government or the incoming government in Belgrade realize the situation and accept the facts that the northern part of Kosovo should be and will be an integrated part of Kosovo. And that Kosovo will not return to the situation before 1999. I think if Serbia is to move forward in the European integration process, and I very much want that, then the political leadership in Belgrade must also realize facts on the ground. But at the same time, it takes a determined effort by the political authorities in Pristina to do what they can, to reach out to the Serb communities all over Kosovo, but also in the northern part of Kosovo, and provide services that make it possible for the communities in the northern part of Kosovo to be fully integrated in Kosovo. And there's no alternative to finding a political solution. That's why I strongly support the EU-sponsored dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, and I urge all parties involved to continue that political process. Let me conclude by saying that it's my strong wish to see all countries in the Western Balkans integrated in the Euro-Atlantic structures, that is the European Union and NATO, and that also includes Serbia. I realize that for historical reasons there may be more skepticism about NATO in Serbia, because people still remember what happened in 1999. But I hope the Serbian population, and not least maybe the young generation, will look to the future instead of to the past. Will look to the future and see that the future of Serbia lies within a positive cooperation with countries in the region, and lies within a continued Euro-Atlantic integration process. We have succeeded in creating a Europe whole, free, and at peace since the end of the Cold War. But we still have some unfinished business in the southeastern part of Europe, and it's my ambition that we can finish that business.
Sir, thank you very much. The meeting is concluded. Thank you.